Global Broadcasting Networks presents Military Mom Talk Radio. We know behind every strong soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine is the family supporting them. With over 200 episodes in 17 countries, over 5 seasons, with 3 million monthly listeners, we are Radio Strong. We're here to share resources and experts on topics important to you, the military family. Join us. We've got another great episode starting right now. Here are your hosts, Sandra Beck and Robin Boyd.
Hey, military moms, this is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with Robin Boyd. And Rob, we've got another jam-packed show today, and we're going to visit with Rick Johnson later on in the show. He's the best-selling author of That's My Son. I have all of his books, and he wrote this great book called 10 Things Great Dads Do, Strategies for Raising Great Kids. I actually read it because in my household, I am the dad.
Well, this is it. And this is something that I do want to talk to him later on in the show about, to share with us, is there are many instances where there is a dad not at home all the time, or maybe not ever. I mean, there are families that are dadless, let alone just having a split family. So there's a lot of complications in our family lives. So it's wonderful we have someone as talented as Rick coming on to help us plow through all of that.
It is. It's tough, and we've got a lot of families that have a dad in the military family, but dad might be on deployment or dad might be working, certain hours or in certain locations. That makes it really tough to have a traditional parenting environment, how we, look at it like on, TV growing up. Because, to me now, the traditional family, I look at my kids' grade schools and we've got blended families, we've got same-sex families, we've got single parents, we've got single mothers, we've got a lot of grandparents raising the kids, especially in our neighborhood where we've got a couple, where both husband and wife are on deployment and grandma and grandpa are raising the kids.
Exactly.
So
right.
The face of today's family is really, really different. We even have a family in town who lost their mother and father and separate. Dad had a heart attack and died. Mom got hit by a car, which is horrible. But the 25-year-old sibling is raising the younger one. So families take every shape you can imagine today. And so that's why having somebody on like Rick Johnson who can talk about these strategies for raising great kids, it's really important, I think.
Absolutely important. And sometimes we're just too ingrained with tradition to be able to think a little more outside the box and be able to say, I can have a relationship with my dad while he's deployed. I can have a relationship with my mom that may have done dad-type things. So being able to have those the permission to go outside what we thought was a traditional family life, new traditions, new normals, this is what today's family is. And no family should be sort of framed the same as somebody else. If this is your family profile, this is what you make it work and how you make it successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why we bring on these parenting experts, because we don't know what you're facing as listeners. I know what I'm facing, in
Sure.
my household, but it also changes, Rob. I got to tell you, my kids, are 8 and 12 now, or 9 and 12, 9 and 12. And their needs and my needs and the household needs are so different than they were when we started the show 6 years ago. I mean, I can't even tell you how different it is.
Very much so. And obviously things do change. Either there is a divorce, there is a loss, there is somebody else moving in, there is a new, whether it be a step parent or whether it be, like you say, an older sibling now taking over. Think of the dynamic of this family. Who was an older brother, or is whether it's a woman or a man, I'm not sure what you said, but an older brother now all of a sudden taking over as a parental role, that dynamic is completely different. They have a completely different role with those younger children.
It is. It is. And I'm really, happy to say, in my family situation, I think of like Coach Pete and Coach Rec. I think about the Meadowlark teachers. That's where my kids go to school.
Yeah.
Mrs. Woolman, Mrs. Trussell, Mrs. Trevelyan. I'm using their names, Mr. Rowland, because I honor them so much because they have stepped in time and time again when the children lost their stepbrother, when he died, when they got remarried, the father and the girlfriend. And, there's been so many changes in our household. And all these parents and teachers have stepped up to help my kids. It's really been an amazing gift to me. And I sometimes feel guilty because I think my kids get more attention than other kids.
Oh, well, I suppose that kind of happens, but I don't think so. I think you might think that, but I'm sure it's not.
That's just my middle child coming out. I was the middle, forgotten child. Oh, poor me. I look at my kids today, but I am grateful, through all my family's been through. And I look at the military family going through the same type of things I'm going through. And then you got to add on top of it the military moves, the segregation in the bases, and maybe you're on base or off post, all these things. There's like a million variables. But at the end of the day, whether you're the mother, the grandmother, the aunt, or the dad, the father, the stepfather, the boyfriend, the uncle, today's episode about 10 things great dads do it can apply to all of us.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And isn't that the ultimate goal? I mean, we're trying to raise healthy, smart, good self-esteem children with good values, regardless of what that build comes from.
Right, because we've got a generation now of war kids. The current war started when Max was born, in July of 2003, and we're now he's 12 years old. So we've got a whole decade plus of children born during this conflict that's very different than other generations. We really have to go back to really Vietnam in the 60s or, back to World War II or the Korean War to have anything even close to this.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So many dynamics, but there again, that's where we're thinking a little more creatively and looking at what your end goal is. What is it that we're trying to achieve? And then finding the path to get there. So lots of wonderful resources. Rick Johnson is a gem, and we're so lucky to have him coming on today.
I am. Now you got some housekeeping to do, don't we? We've got some.
Well, a little bit. Yeah, just some news across the country kind of thing. I noticed that the TRICARE pharmacy issue is starting on October 1st, that beneficiaries living in the U.S. will be required to fill their maintenance drugs through TRICARE starting October 1st. So that's right around the corner. Those who are affected by it should have gotten a letter from Express Scripts, and if this pertains to you, you would have gotten this information. So if you kind of thought it was junk mail or thought that it wasn't necessarily pertinent to you, you should look at it. And this again only pertains to people who are getting their maintenance prescriptions through, say, a retail pharmacy like CVS or Rite Aid or the local pharmacy. If you are getting your prescriptions through military treatment facilities, then you're already in where you should be and you should be fine. But it's one of those things that creeps up on you with the start of school and getting kids back into the swing of things for those at the beginning of a year. Sometimes you forget about this kind of prescription drug thing. So you want to make sure if TRICARE affects you that you are taking care of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was something else that I came across. Have you ever been involved, Sandra, in the extension program through either the 4-H or the universities in your area?
No.
My mother was. When I was a kid, I remember her traveling, and she used to keep me out of school every so often when she would have an extension meeting, and this was through the University of New Hampshire and 4-H programs, and it's called the Cooperative Extension Program, which is a wonderful adult learning kind of organization. It's not really like a classroom type of thing, but you belong to Cooperative Extension, and you get to go to a lot of different programs throughout your area. And there is a whole section in extension.org that is geared toward military family learnings, the Learning Network seminars. They cover everything from family development to military caregiving, personal finance, nutrition, and wellness. There's a lot of programs. Many of them are free or very, very low cost. And I believe that many of them are virtual, so it's not even a matter of physically having to go. But I wanted people to understand that there are a lot of resources for military families at extension.org, extension.org. How to obtain continuing aid units, for example, a whole chapter on resource books, childcare, coping, healthy recipes, creating new strategies to build trust and credibility. A lot of family enrichment through the extension program. So if you've never heard of cooperative extension, take a look, Google it, and find where cooperative extension programs are in your area. And especially if you've gotten into a new area, you've just moved, you've just had a move, you may want to check out what's in that new area so that you're able to find some cool stuff.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like I say, I can remember going to extension meetings with my mom. She would take me out of school because she kind of was thinking, I'm going to get something very different and very unique. And I remember going and learning how to cane a chair with my mother.
That a girl. Better than being caned.
Sandra, we've got a break coming up, and on the other side of the break, we're going to meet author and speaker Rick Johnson. He's the founder of Better Dads, whose mission is to influence families with life-changing insights on parenting, marriage, and personal growth. I can't wait to talk to him. I can't wait to meet him, and I'm so anxious for all of you to meet him as well. Be back in a moment. We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Have you heard? The pages of American Patchwork and Quilting magazine come to life on our new weekly online radio show, American Patchwork and Quilting. Join Pat Sloan, our blogging and quilt designer host, as she talks about the latest trends, ideas, and inspirations. Her guests include quilt pattern designers, authors, quilt shop owners, and our editors, all quilters, just like you. Call in with your questions. Get quilting tips from industry experts. Learn about free patterns. Hear behind-the-scenes stories from our magazines, American Patchwork and Quilting, Quilt Sampler, and Quilts and More. Get the scoop on free stuff and find out more about the best independent quilt shops in North America. To listen to a live show, tune in Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Just log on to allpeoplequilt.com/radio. To hear past shows, go to iTunes and search for American Patchwork and Quilting Radio. We hope you'll join us because we know that quilting changes everything.
Are you ready to start rocking that woohoo that only you do? Because Lisa Stedman is on a mission. She will dare you, challenge you, enlighten you, provoke, and empower you to bring out that inner woohoo. Lisa is an internationally acclaimed best-selling author. She is a breakup expert, a brand consultant, CEO of Woohoo Inc. and the Woohoo Radio Network. She will show you how to take your boohoo and turn it into woohoo. woohoo, get rebellious, and get real. Get your dreams off the back burner. Get inspired and motivated to take action. Start rocking that woohoo that only you do in love, life, and business. She is going to be here for you every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Only here on the Woohoo Radio Network.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Robin Boyd, and we are visiting today with Rick Johnson as promised. His latest book, 10 Things Great Dads Do, Strategies for Raising Great Kids, is really important. He wrote another great book that I have a copy of, That's My Son, which I like, and I think I have That's My Teenage Son. I know I got, at least I think it's That's My Teenage Son, That's My Son. I don't have a daughter, so I never bought That's My Girl, but I do have it might be another one, Stronger Son. I think I'm killing your intro here, Rick. But thank you so much for being here with us today. And can you just read the titles of all of your books? Because I think it's appropriate for our listeners today. They may want to buy any one, or in my case, like 5 out of the 6.
Wow, I don't. There's like 11 of them, so I'm not sure. I don't know if I can remember all the titles. But in the background, there's 3 of them there. There's That's My Son. And then there was a sequel to that. That's My Teenage Son. Better Dads, Stronger Sons. Becoming Your Spouse's Better Half, which is a best-selling marriage book. I have a book for women on speaking their husband's language called How to Talk So Your Husband Will Listen and Listen So Your Husband Will Talk. We have the Father-Daughter book, which is Becoming the Dad Your Daughter Needs. What else? I don't know. There's several. More than you probably want to know about. So
I'm hoping that everybody heads out to the bookstore and finds these, because so many of what I think I hear parents not complaining about, but being finding a struggle are covered in so many of your titles. Rick, fundamentally, when you look back, say over the last 20 or 30 years, how has parenting changed over the last few years that you see is end?
Sure. Well, and I think just from the last generation to this generation, parenting has changed quite a bit. On one hand, we have completely different roles for fathers than we used to have. I mean, even when I was a young father, there was still this common perception that I think a father's main role in life was to provide for his family. And in fact, I remember my wife and I had to lobby pretty hard to get me to be in the delivery room when our children were born. Okay, I mean, I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old, right? So that's kind of, there's been some significant changes. Now, I think nearly all dads really want to be more involved than maybe their dads or grandfathers were in their children's lives. And the offset to that, I think, is that we find ourselves in a situation where we have a lot of divorce taking place in our culture, and we have a lot of men that have grown up without any or without a positive role model of what a healthy father looks like. And so a lot of young men that I work with today want to be good dads. I think a lot of times they just don't really know what it is that they're supposed to do because they haven't had it modeled for them. And as males, that's how we learn best, is by observing, by having it modeled for us instead of reading about it or somebody telling us about it.
So what do you see as the biggest, the military family's a little bit different. They have all the, troubles and tribulations and trials of a traditional family in today's world. But then you throw on top of it the fragmenting of families. They're living far away from relatives. Their dad or mom might be coming back and forth on deployment. They might be moving every 2 years. Sometimes they're moving overseas. That's an additional stressor on our family families. And how do you think that affects in your mind, the ability for the military family, the typical one, to parent effectively?
Mm-hmm. Well, I obviously it's a huge factor. In fact, I remember when I was in the service, I distinctly remember being really glad that I wasn't married at the time, because of a lot of the things that I observed even back then would have been pretty tough to deal with, particularly deployment. You're taking young women out of their families, out of their contacts, their friends, and putting them in environments where they don't know anybody. Then you're sending their husbands off. Significantly difficult. You've got young women that are essentially single mothers for extended periods of time. You combat that with, several years ago, I spent a couple of years working with special forces and their families, and they have 80% divorce rate or whatever the statistics are. They're pretty grim. And they face even more significant challenges probably than the average military family does. But, all of those things obviously make it really difficult to parent, especially if you consider your marriage to be the foundation of what your children need most in order to be raised healthily. I think that's the key component to being a good parent, is having a good marriage.
Mm. Rick, so many times I think when parents are separated for a duration, the person who is at home with the children may have established a routine or whatever. And then many times when that deployed person is back in with the family unit again, maybe things are a little bit different than what he or she had remembered of the family. What's your advice for couples to sort of reunite and get back on track? The worst thing you can do is sort of disagree with either a discipline or a permission right in front of the child. How do you get back on track with each other before you continue with positive parenting?
Yeah, and I think that can be definitely a real challenge. I heard that a lot when I was working with the group that I was working with. And, particularly if you've been deployed to combat zones or things like that, you have even more significant challenges to deal with when you come back. I think one of the things that maybe you need to do as a couple is to take it slow, try to get an opportunity to get away by yourselves if possible. Just kind of work through some of these things before you get too involved one way or another. Mom has been, again, essentially a single mom for all this time. She's been used to making all the decisions. Dad maybe has been used to being the leader of the home. He comes home, now he's wanting to tell everybody what to do. And here Mom, again, like you said, she has a routine that seems to be successful. And that can cause a lot of strife and problems. But I think if you can take it slow and anticipate some of these kinds of things, part of the problems that I see with all parents is when we're being reactive instead of proactive about certain situations. So, and that could be just about anything. When we react, we tend to not do very well. But if we can be proactive and anticipate these kinds of things before they happen and have a plan in place to be able to deal with them, it tends to be a little bit easier and a little bit smoother transition.
Mm. And it is a challenge. It's quite the challenge, because not only are they dealing with reuniting, there's also some issues in reintegration that are always evident, regardless if they're significant or maybe not as significant. There certainly is the complications. What about you, Rick? When you were growing up, who were the men in your life?
Well, and I grew up like probably a lot of guys now in our culture. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My mother was an alcoholic. My stepfather was an alcoholic. Pretty abusive environment, physically, mentally. And so when I grew up, you tend to walk in the footsteps that are modeled for you. I kind of made a lot of bad choices growing up. I didn't really have any. I suppose maybe some sports coaches were the best male role models that I had. It's interesting, though, that one of the things that I see with people who come from those types of environments and successfully overcome them. Almost to a person, they tell me that at some point during their growing up, there was a person or a couple or a family that they were able to observe that modeled for them what a healthy environment looked like. And I think I had, whether they were friends, or whatever, I think I was fortunate enough to observe a couple of those kinds of things, which gave me a vision to be able to say, I don't want to live in this way. I don't want to walk in those footsteps. I want to try to emulate this. And so, I was able to overcome some of that stuff, but it was a challenge for me. It was a challenge for me, both as a husband, as a man, as a father, to try to figure out what those roles were, what those looked like, because I hadn't had it modeled for me before.
Mm. Did you have siblings?
I did. I had 3 step siblings that I was raised with, and then I have 3 step siblings that I wasn't raised with. So
you really do have some varying perspectives to bring to the table when you are talking with the families that you are talking. That's a nice way to
put it. Yeah. Well, and you asked me about. I was very fortunate to, when I was 24 years old, right after I'd gotten out of the service, to meet my biological father, and he's a great man. I mean, we have a great relationship over the years. We've developed a very close relationship. And he really, I think, in a quiet, sort of understated way, role modeled for me a lot of the things that I assimilated about what it means to be a man, a husband, a father, those types of things.
It's interesting, and I hope that people are open to always learning. I think when you become a dad, you're hoping to be the person that you would want to have had as a dad. And sometimes things change in your life and new influences come in. So I'm hoping that people are open to all of those influences. And you obviously have had such a variation and are bringing such a positive light to all of the things that you have been challenged with. So we're grateful that you're here. We're going to go to a commercial break, Rick. And on the other side of the break, you briefly talked a little bit about maybe men having been leaders, especially if you've been in the military. But I want to talk a little bit about what's the difference between being a leader or being bossy. That can be a very fine line. We're going to be back right after the break with Rick Johnson. We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
If you could live your life truly standing in a place of peace, joy, and abundance, wouldn't that make your heart soar? Now you can, with Lessons in Joyful Living, with your host, Kimberly Rinaldi, Mondays at noon Central. Kimberly Rinaldi, having created a highly successful coaching practice, now teaches Lessons in Joyful Living. She believes in empowering others and that through it, you have the ability to break through any and all barriers, thus allowing you to reach your greatest potential and joyfully step into your life's purpose. What used to take weeks, months, or even years, she can now teach you in a matter of hours with her programs. For more on Kim and her show, go to her website, KimberlyRinaldi.com. That's RINALDI.com. Then join us for Lessons in Joyful Living with your host, Kimberly Rinaldi.
Do you ever wonder if you're the only woman who runs errands in her yoga pants so it will look like she went to the gym? Or how about the only mom who feeds her kids raw cookie dough? Or are you the only one who cooks her family cold cereal for dinner? Do you need more laughter and less loudness? More self-love and less self-loathing? More joy and less judgment? You're not alone. Come to the living room. a place where we get comfy, candid, and confident together. Come seeking sanctuary and leave feeling renewed. We're saving a seat for you. Give yourself some living room today.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Hey ladies, this is Sandra Beck and I'm here with Robin Boyd. And for those of you that missed the first half of the show, you can find this and a couple hundred hours of family-friendly programming on Global Broadcasting Network's website, TogiNet, that's TOGINET.com. You can go to iTunes, look up Military Mom Talk Radio. You'll find us there. You can find this and many other episodes that can help you with your parenting. We're visiting today with Rick Johnson. And, you know, Rob, this weekend when I was at soccer, I was watching the parenting, you know, in preparation for today's show between the moms and the dads. And, you know, we had a soccer practice, then we had a double header, and I watched the moms, you know, like nag their kids and what they were supposed to do. But the dads handled it very differently. Like, you know, one of the dads just told his son, hey, you got to do X, Y, and Z. If you don't, they're going to take the ball away from you. If you kick it hard, you're going to get hit in the face. Dad told him once or twice, dropped it, kid didn't learn. And you know, then he got hit in the face. And then he's like, oh, well, you know, I guess I learned. But it was very, very different parenting. And you mentioned before we went to break the difference between leadership and being bossy. And I'm going to throw in that caveat for Rick, since he is, you know, the dad expert over here. The different parenting styles, and should moms adopt a more dad parenting style if they are the dad in the household? So there's a mouthful for you, Rick.
Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap there. First of all, let me just clarify, a fathering expert, I get called that a lot. If you define expert by somebody that's made all the mistakes possible you can make, then maybe I qualify for it. But
Attaboy.
Yeah, you know, and no, I'm not sure that moms should become more like dads. I think you know, a mom and a father's parenting styles, at least generalization of those parenting styles, complement each other very well. Moms tend to have more of a unconditional love. Fathers tend to have more of a performance-based kind of love. And I think kids need both of those to be healthy. That said, let me say that I work a lot with single moms raising boys, have for years. And the boys who tend to grow up to be good men raised by single moms all tell me one thing. They say, Mom was really tough on me. Mom was really hard on us. She didn't put up with a lot of nonsense. So I think maybe there is some wisdom to that if dad is maybe gone for an extended period of time. That said, as you mentioned with the soccer ball incident, experience tends to be the best teacher. And one of the challenges that I put forth in my book is that we know that suffering creates character in people. In fact, it's really hard to develop character without suffering. And so the challenge is for parents, especially maybe for moms who don't like to, or people from my background who, you know, are aghast at allowing our kids to suffer. We don't want them to live any kind of a lifestyle like we did growing up. How do you allow them to suffer to develop character enough without traumatizing them? And so that tends to be the big question.
It is a big question because that's something that is very experience-based, and you almost have to control the experiences that your children have to result in the character you're trying to hopefully instill in your child. We have I'm very involved with our Girl Scouting organization, and our mission, of course, is building girls of courage, confidence, and character. So I'm curious to know, where does that leadership element come in your mind to be able to develop this kind of character? How can we get children to feel confident, to feel able to lead without being bossy, without being the kid that everybody hates to sit with on the bus?
Well, and I think the first step to that is that we have to have a vision. We have to know what it is that we think is important. As a husband and wife, we have to sit down and say, here's what we want our family to stand for. Here's the values that we think are important. Here's the values and the character traits that we want to really focus on instilling in our kids. Because, again, you want to be proactive instead of reactive. So then when that happens, when you get an opportunity where something comes up, you allow your children to suffer the consequences of their choices and decisions. For instance, you might tell them, look, here, if you do this, here's what's going to happen. If you don't do it, here's what's going to happen. It's your choice, but then you allow them to suffer the consequences of that. That's the best learning tool, I think, for kids. Not only that, but especially with boys, probably with girls too, we develop healthy self-esteem, self-image by trying something, failing, persevering until we succeed at it. That's, especially with males, that's how we develop healthy self-esteem. We don't develop healthy self-esteem by mom telling us how wonderful we are. Okay? So when we don't allow boys and girls, I think, to fail, first of all, we don't allow them to learn, because that's the best teaching tool is our failures. But secondly, we also don't allow them to develop healthy self-esteem. Because if we rescue them too much, they fail to learn that. And my wife and I, again, both from very abusive backgrounds growing up, we look back with our kids and we would probably readily admit that we maybe rescued them a little bit too much. We didn't allow them to suffer the consequences of their choices and decisions. And I think it's been somewhat harmful for them as adults.
Rick, it's interesting you say that, because I'm a big fan of your work, and I read your stuff and I follow it, because I do have primarily, other than my dad when he's here, and he's 81 and he's like the quintessential Santa grandpa. Anything you say, boys, everything you want to do, boys, you're wonderful, you're wonderful, wonderful. So I find myself putting on the hat of bad cop. But you're right. I was after my kid for weeks to unpack his backpack when he gets home, take out his old lunch thing, take out his old, dirty gym clothes. And, he's a boy, so, they get pretty ripe, and, he's starting to like girls now. And, and it was really hard for me not to unpack his backpack this weekend. And his backpack got full of ants because we live in the desert. And this morning he looked at me ready to cry. He's like, Mom, my gym clothes are disgusting. They've been sitting in, 100-degree heat in my backpack in the car all weekend. And I'm like, sorry, bud, love you, but told you, at least 10 times, clean out your lunchbox, clean out your gym clothes. And it was really difficult for me as a mom to watch him cry. He's going to be embarrassed in gym class. He's going to be the kid who stinks. But,
only once.
Only once, yeah. I mean, in my house, my dad was Navy, and my mom was, she was raised by a single mom, and in those days, that really didn't happen. And boy, she was tough on us, and she didn't give us a break. But when I went through my own traumas in my life, I knew I could survive. I knew I could handle it. And as much as it's a heartbreaker as a mom side of me, the dad side of me is like, well, you know what? You learned a tough lesson, and sorry you stink.
Yeah, well, and they're life lessons. By the way, I'm proud of you for doing that.
That was hard.
Awesome. Good job.
So I would like to talk about teaching character, because, my kids and I have these fireside chats, and, we make a plan. We can't eat dinner together every night of the week because some nights they do go to see their dad and stepmom. But like Mondays and Wednesdays are our non-negotiable days. Every other Friday are non-negotiable. We have identified family time, and that can be to, eat dinner, swim in the pool, whatever it is. But, there's no influence, no cell phones, no anything. I make them put their phones in a box, which they hate. I got to tell you, you talk about hating them. Put it in a box and say, okay, put your phone in there. And then they're like, Mom, you too. So, but it's necessary. And we have these discussions about character. What else do you do to help a little boy build character, specifically in a we're going to call it female-centered household, whether it's divorce, dad's on deployment, or dad's, gone?
Well, a couple of things that I think are helpful, again, because boys are visual. Boys are also very attracted to movies, things like that. Movies are a great opportunity because they tend to show, examples of some of the best and some of the worst character qualities that men possess. And so, sitting down with your son and watching some of these kinds of movies and saying things like, wow, what kind of character do you think that guy has? Or that's what a man is like right there. What do you think about that? Those kinds of conversations I think can be very helpful for boys. The other side to that is, again, if the dad's deployed is one thing, but maybe if it's a situation where the family is divorced or something like that, it is really imperative for mom to find positive male role models to be in a boy's life. And those can, I think when I talk to single moms and say that, they know that, right? But it's like, where do we find these guys, right? And so, we talk a lot about everything from grandpas to uncles to coaches to male teachers, whatever. But also even neighbors, if the guy down the street's a good man, talk to him and his wife and say, the next time you take your kids to the game, can you ask my boy to go? Or the next time you mow the lawn, can you ask my son to come over and help? It's not being this great wise mentor as much as it is a boy seeing what it means to be a man, how a man thinks, how he acts, how he solves problems, how he faces life.
We've only got a couple of minutes before the break, Rick, and I wanted to sort of run by you what I used to do with my kids. We would sit down to watch a TV show, and in between, instead of watching the commercial, I would mute the television, and I would say, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think this person is feeling? Why do you think do you think this little girl is feeling guilty, or do you think the little boy is feeling guilty, and why? And we would use that time for conversation and be able to sort of project what could the outcome be given the circumstances that are in the plot. And it was great for my kids to forecast, to be able to have the ability to say, all right, here's an action. This looks cool right now, but what's the end result going to be if we go this path, and maybe we should choose a different path.
I think there's a lot of great things in that scenario. It's a great way to teach kids compassion and empathy. I think the important thing that you really tied into is that, TV gets a bad rap, rightfully so in a lot of situations, but it can also be used as a very powerful family tool to teach all kinds of lessons. It just depends on how much we're involved with our kids.
Right. And sitting and watching the shows with them, I think, is important. And it's got to be difficult sometimes because we've got a gazillion things that we've got to accomplish in the 24 hours we're given. But I think those kinds of things are important. And if they're going to be exposed to media, you might as well be a part of it. So, Rick, we'll keep you on board. We've got Rick Johnson with us. He's the founder of BetterDads.net. We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
If you're ready for a big change in your work, your career, your happiness, your life, it's time for the $1 Million Mindset with Marla Tabaka. Monday afternoons at 2, 1 Central on TogiNet.com. Marla believes that with the right mindset, anything is possible. Join us as successful life coach Marla Tabaka inspires you and her clients to explore, discover, and live your dreams by developing what she calls the $1 Million Mindset. Marla will inspire you to take action on your dreams and reveal secrets to success that will help you realize your own unique power. Tune into the $1 Million Mindset for heartwarming stories with Marla Tabaka. Learn tips and tricks to building a successful business and unlock the secrets to creating a happier, more balanced life through abundant thinking and attraction power. For more information on the $1 Million Mindset, go to our website, marlatabaka.com. That's MarlaTabaka.com. It's the $1 Million Mindset with Marla Tabaka. Monday afternoons at 2, 1 p.m. Central on TogiNet.com.
Have you heard? The pages of American Patchwork and Quilting magazine come to life on our new weekly online radio show, American Patchwork and Quilting. Join Pat Sloan, our blogging and quilt designer host, as she talks about the latest trends, ideas, and inspirations. Her guests include quilt pattern designers, authors, quilt shop owners, and our editors, all quilters, just like you. Call in with your questions. Get quilting tips from industry experts. Learn about free patterns. Hear behind-the-scenes stories from our magazines, American Patchwork and Quilting, Quilt Sampler, and Quilts and More. Get the scoop on free stuff and find out more about the best independent quilt shops in North America. To listen to a live show, tune in Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Just log on to allpeoplequilt.com/radio. To hear past shows, go to iTunes and search for American Patchwork and Quilting Radio. We hope you'll join us because we know that quilting changes everything.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Hey, military moms, this is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with Robin Boyd. And Rob, we were talking during the break about, what happens when your kids, because here I've taught my kids to not judge. I come from a Christian family, so we judge. We don't, or well, sometimes we judge, but we try not to judge, but we're discerning,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
My one son has a heart of gold, and he loves everyone. He was popped out that way, a little happy kid. But he doesn't make the best choices sometimes in the friends that I would like him to be with, and he's always trying to include everybody. And as a result, he includes some kids that are real troubled, and he gets involved in things. And I'm not being one of those moms who doesn't recognize her own kid does, bad things at times. They do, I get it. Mm-hmm. But when they choose friends that you wouldn't want them to have or that aren't good influences on them, and yet you've taught them to live with an open heart, be loving and accepting and non-judgmental, where do you go with that?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, Rick, Robin, anybody at this point, because it's my health hour.
Well, I wasn't sure if you were going. Yeah, go to Rick, because Rick, I had the similar situation. Just to expand that a little bit, I remember when my kids were about Sandra's children's age. There was especially a couple of kids that would come to the house, and you could see the deviousness, or that they would intend to, let's do something, your mom won't see this, or let's see if we can do this without your mom finding out. And of course, the mom with the eyes in the back of her head are going to know that, okay, there's something going on behind my back that I really don't want. That seems very innocent when they're 11 and 12, but you can just look down the road 5 years later when they're 16 and 17 years old, then what kind of events are they going to get themselves involved in, far more serious than whether or not they're going to see whether they stole cookies out of the cookie jar.
Yeah, one of the chapters in the book that I talk about is being the gatekeeper of your home, and the importance of that. And, I talk with a lot of parents that are very uncomfortable with dictating or interfering with the friends that their children make. And here's how we kind of looked at it. You wouldn't allow your kids to play with a cabinet full of dangerous medicine or drugs, and you wouldn't allow your kids to hang out with pimps or pushers. But the truth of the matter is there's some kids in your children's school that are apprenticing for those jobs right now. And so we felt it was imperative for us to be involved in the kind of kids that our friends that our children made while they were growing up. And we did that in a number of ways, not overbearingly, hopefully. One of the things that we did is we made sure that we had a pool in the backyard, trampolines, all the things, and that we always invited their friends over to our house. When they came over, they always got fed, usually pizza or something like that. We wanted an environment where our kids were hanging around our home, where we knew what was going on as much as possible. One of you mentioned about your son having a kind heart. Our daughter was like that, and for whatever reason, she seemed to be drawn to only girls who didn't have mothers, which you would think is unusual, and yet she found quite a few of these young women that were raised in those situations. And because of the work that I do, we were able to kind of sit down and talk with her a little bit after having met those people. those girls and explain that, look, statistically, here's what could potentially happen in kids' lives who grow up in these situations. Doesn't mean it's going to always be that way, but it's something just for her to be aware of. The other thing that we wanted to do is we always wanted to meet our kids' friends' parents. That wasn't always really comfortable because a lot of times they were parents that we would never allow our kids to go over to their home. Nonetheless, we wanted to meet them, if nothing else, for our children to have a comparison of us as parents versus their friends as parents and what that looked like. And frankly, there were some times when we just had to say, we're not comfortable with you being friends with that person, and had to deal with it from that perspective.
Yeah. As children get older into those teen years, how do you think that kind of approach resonates? Do you think that encourages them to do things behind your back, or do you think that you are giving what your value is in a friend, therefore you would hope that they would model after you in your perspective?
Well, certainly as they get older, I don't think forbidding them to do almost anything is probably going to be a very good strategy. Nevertheless, interestingly, a lot of the friends of my daughter who we had talked about what the statistics would say ended up following those exact paths. And so she was able to see, without us even saying anything, without us saying, I told you so or whatever, that maybe mom and dad knew what they were talking about. And it really only took one or two of those for her to, maybe she didn't admit that, we were, great and knew what we were talking about, but I think she still followed along with some of the values that we had said. But, and I think the other thing is not judging them. I mean, I don't know who's mentioned that, but, I think it's important to accept their friends even if we're not approving of them. Because I talked earlier about people from those environments needing to have a positive role model, sometimes an example, and maybe we serve that. Maybe in the bigger picture, we're the only people that they see that there's a normal family, and gives them the vision of what they want to try to achieve when they get older.
Well, and one of the things I've been doing, and Rick, I'd love to get your take on this because, any free parenting advice I can get, even if it's on the air, is appreciated. I have sorted my kids' friends, and I've told them this. We've got red light friends, green light friends, and yellow light friends. And, I always want to give a chance for a red light friend to come up to be a green light friend. And because we have certain rules in our household, there is no profanity. There is, you clear your plate, you say please and thank you, you ask before you go in my kitchen to get something. You ask before you turn on the TV. When I say get out of the pool, it means get out of the pool. And I'm real clear when my kids' friends come over. And when the kids are naughty, I'm clear with them. And if they're really naughty, because in a couple of cases, these kids were really naughty, I'm on the phone in a New York Minute calling the parents going, you need to come and pick up your child. I'm sorry, this is not appropriate behavior in my house. And, so my kids know that they're green light, red light, yellow light friends. And that if they're going to be over here, they're going to behave, essentially, because it's my house. This isn't I don't like your friends things. This is, I pay for this house. This is where we live. This is our safe place to go. This is our family boundary kind of thing. And I've noticed that the kids then clamor to come over to my house when they've been bounced from the house or they've been kicked out of the house. Sure. Then they want to know, their parents make them call me. They have to apologize to me, not because I have an ego trip, but I need these guys to know, hey, rules exist, whether it's here in the military, in the school, or whatever, because I think people are afraid. Parents are afraid today to enforce any rule.
Right. No, and I think that's a great example of being a parent versus being a friend of your children. I think kids, no matter what background they come from, are attracted to and thrive under good boundaries, rules. They need that. It makes them feel safe and secure. And so, if we can provide that, maybe that's the only example of that some of these kids are getting in their lives. It's a good thing.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I think there's also very room for children to understand that there are different rules in different environments. I mean, if you go to church, you're going to have different rules than you have maybe at school. Similar, yes, but they are going to be different. If you go to this house, this might be permitted, but you go to that house and maybe that's not preferred. And understanding that there are differences, different rules is important. Rick, what's your thought if, because we were talking about so many instances where maybe there are single moms, what do you suggest if you're feeling that your children need a positive male role? Should the mom just fill in that male position, or should we really try to find somebody, be it a coach or be it a teacher? Is it really important to find a male to help influence children?
Well, I believe it is, and here's the reason why. And I think the first person I heard say this was John Eldridge, but the fact that masculinity bestows masculinity, femininity can never bestow masculinity. And I think that's very true. Doesn't mean that moms aren't extremely important in raising boys. Millions of men have been raised just by their mothers and ended up to be great men, some of the greatest men our country's produced. But again, the ones that I see that tend to be more successful were where mom was the catalyst to facilitate a positive male role model in her son's life. Now, for moms who've been wounded, sometimes they might not make good choices, and they have to be really careful about how they go about doing that. But I think mom has to be the catalyst because she needs to be, again, the gatekeeper about what kind of men she's allowing to be involved in her son's life.
Interesting. As we said at the top of the hour, Rick, you have 11 books out there for people to get information, and you have speaking engagements as well. The best place, I'm assuming, is your website. Can you give everybody your website?
Right, yeah, betterdads.net. And you can buy any of my books there. I'll even sign them for you. And there's all kinds of information on the programs that we do. Speaking engagement schedule, things like that. Wonderful.
And what part of the country are you, Rick?
I live in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay. Just so if someone is looking for a speaking engagement with Rick Johnson, at least they know what neck of the woods you're in.
I'm all over, though. I'm everywhere. I actually don't speak in the Pacific Northwest very much, surprisingly enough. I'm usually down, south or east or Midwest or something like that.
Yeah. Rick Johnson, thanks for being our guest today. We so appreciate it, and wish everybody to visit betterdads.net just for the most wonderful enrichment in your heart you could find. Thanks, Rick, for being with us, and thank you all for being on Military Mom Talk Radio today. Thanks for spending time with us today on Military Mom Talk Radio. We've got more than 200 episodes available to you anytime on iTunes or at our website, militarymomtalkradio.com. Find us on Facebook or Twitter. We look forward to another great conversation